Welcome to the Axecast podcast. Conversations with interesting people from the world of Acadia athletics and more, talking about their lives, successes, and failures. And now let's join hosts Glenn Hawley and Eric Cederberg for the next 15 to 20 minutes as they dive into the life of today's guest.
This week on our Axecast, a rare two-sport athlete in the modern era, played basketball and football at Acadia upon his arrival in 2011. SeanStoqua is our guest this week. Sean, good to see you, and thanks for doing this.
Hey, absolutely, guys. It's a pleasure to be on the Axecast. I've been tuning into episodes and excited to be on here.
No, this is going to be a fun conversation. We're going to cover a lot of ground, but as what we always do, Sean, is just sort of give an idea of sort of how do you arrived at Acadia here. Give us an idea of what transpired for you to come to Wolfville, Nova Scotia.
Okay, yeah. So this one's not too long of a story. So back in just growing up throughout high school, I got to start by giving a shout out to one of my best friends, Anthony Ash. So Anthony Ash is a fellow Acadia Axeman basketball alum, and he's probably 4 or 5 years older than I am, and he grew up down the street from me in Stittsville in Ottawa. So when I was growing up in high school, Anthony was really a guy I looked up to. I would always try to snag a ride home from high school with him, or I'd go watch him play basketball, with his senior team. And I actually practiced with our high school team when I was in grade 7. So he was able to help bring me out and just get some experience that way. And he was at Acadia by the time I reached the 12th grade. So that was an experience that he was enjoying. And he was one of the first guys to talk to Steve Bauer and let him know that I might be a guy that we want to recruit. And he was a guy who was trying to recruit me himself out there. So that was a big factor. Absolutely, was just having Anthony Ash at that school, and that gave me a certain feeling of comfortability as well. Just knowing somebody out there who I trusted and was comfortable with. And then there was only a handful of schools I was looking at. So in grade 12, I was playing high school football, but I wasn't recruited for high school football from any school, including Acadia, but we'll get to that in a bit, I guess. And I wasn't really highly recruited as a basketball player either. I think, I was part of Carleton University's farm team, the Ottawa Guardsmen. And I think most coaches assumed that I was going to go to that school to play basketball because I was being recruited by them. But, once I got in touch with Steve Bauer, one of the first things Steve did was bring up the possibility of me playing 2 sports at Acadia, because Eli Prochnow was doing it at the time. So Eli's another good friend of mine, and he was playing basketball and football at the time. And I had a nice chat with him on the phone before I ever came out to Acadia for a visit, and just talked about what it was like playing 2 sports and that kind of thing, if it was a possibility. And then once I got out to Wolfville, got an opportunity to see the campus, see the basketball program, meet the guys, see the football program a little bit. Didn't get to spend a ton of time with them. It was more of a basketball recruiting trip than anything, but I got a chance to speak with Coach Cummins, and he told me that, I'd have a chance to come out and try out for the team in training camp. And just that idea of playing 2 sports was so exciting to me. It seemed like such a challenge that I wasn't necessarily sure I could pull off at the time. So when I was, in grade 12, coming straight out of high school, I didn't do a grade 13 or anything like that. But I knew my dad had played 2 sports at university. So at Carleton, he played both basketball and football as well. So I knew that, it was more popular back in the 70s and that kind of thing. But I just felt like I had what it took, and I was capable, considering my dad had done it as well, and that Eli was currently doing it. So a combination of all those factors definitely led me out to Acadia, and as well as the kinesiology program. So that was something I was really deciding between Carleton and Acadia at the time. And Carleton didn't really have an academic program I was interested in, and they didn't have a football program at the time either. So just a combination of those factors brought me out to Acadia.
The 2 sports was in your blood, man. Like you had no choice, right? But
Exactly.
What are the 2 sports when you were growing up that you liked the best?
So I didn't actually start playing football until I was 16. So my dad played professionally for the Ottawa Rough Riders in the 80s. And he, I think, intentionally didn't put me in football at a young age. He got me more into the basketball side of things, and I really enjoyed basketball. But when high school rolled around, some of my friends started to jump. Like some of my friends played basketball, but a lot of them didn't. A lot of them played football or hockey. So when we finally got a high school team, I definitely hopped in to football because I just wanted to play with my friends and wanted to join them and some of that stuff. So definitely basketball was a lot more fun growing up because that's the only one I did. But once I started playing football, the adrenaline rush was definitely something new. So for example, like on the basketball court, I couldn't get that same adrenaline rush as I could on the football field. So that was something that definitely kept me coming back to football. And just naturally, just with my stature and my height, I was more suited for football. Like right off the get-go, that was pretty obvious to me. I didn't have the same, not that I was limited by my height in basketball, but I just felt I fit better into the sport of football, and I had more positions available to me.
I never got to meet your dad. I had a Pat Stoqua card that I wanted signed, and I never did it. I was a super rider fan, man. I tell you, I was back in I think your dad retired around then. So
sorry, it's not worth much these days anyways. So
you know what's interesting, and you made the comment about Steve Bauer recruiting you here, and usually you'd think it would be the other way around, and that you'd be eager to want to play two sports. And coaches, human nature is that they want to be very protective over their athletes in their respective sports. Yet he seemed to be a guy that was open to you playing two sports coming here. Yeah,
so I think you'd have to ask Steve about this, but as far as I'm concerned, I think part of it was he wanted to get me away from Carleton. So I don't think the plan, and even my plan, like it wasn't necessarily to play both sports all 4 years. It was something that I was just trying out my first year. We were going to see how it went. And I think most people anticipated that I probably wouldn't even make the team my first year. And then I'd just end up doing basketball for all 4 years. That didn't exactly pan out because I did better than I thought I would right away in training camp. You know what I mean? And that didn't end up being how it panned out. But he had a couple rules for me. So one was like, I wasn't allowed to return punts or kicks, which is something I did in high school. But Steve was like, no, we're not having any of that. Because that was just one of the higher risk things, right? Like a lot of those, like when you catch the ball, everyone's trying to tackle you in that situation, right? So at least being a defensive player, I played defensive back, right, every year. And at least I was doing the hitting in that situation. Not that it's like much more safer, but I think that was part of the thought process for Steve. So that was definitely a factor. And I'm just super grateful for him, man, just giving me the opportunity to come out and do that. A lot of coaches just wouldn't even entertain that thought, right? But I think he saw that as an opportunity to help me get out there and hopefully improve the basketball team.
I think it came down to Steve settling for the fact that we were going to play football rather than Cummins settling for the fact that we play basketball. Because, you know, the way Cummins always acted was that, yeah, we'll let him go play basketball. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, you're lucky Bauer's letting him play football.
Right. Yeah. Just the timing of the seasons is a little different, right? So how it worked generally was football season we start camp maybe late August. And depending on how well we do, we go all the way till November if we make playoffs or not, or how well we do in playoffs. And basketball preseason might start, at Acadia, it was generally, October 1st, we get going. So I'd always miss, a month or even up to 2 months worth of basketball preseason, and sometimes the first few games of the regular season. So it was only my fourth year when, so we would have lost to St. FX in the AUS semifinal. That was the only year where I was there for the entire basketball regular season. I was able to play in all the games my fourth year, but every year prior to that, I would miss at least like 1 or 2 regular season games and the entire preseason. So it wasn't ideal for our basketball team, man. Like, to be honest, obviously it's better to have your point guard and all your team there for the entire season, the entire preseason. But it's the sacrifice that I made and the sacrifice that our team made for me, to allow me to miss the preseason and that kind of thing and play basketball. And at the end of the day, I might not have been there if that wasn't a possibility, right? So when because there was definitely a lot of pressure, man. Like, despite how well it was going after my first couple of years, there was a lot of people who were pressuring me to quit either sport. And I kind of had to stand my ground. And I had to remind people, like, look, if I wasn't playing both sports, I might not even be here in the first place. So that was definitely something that I had to kind of remind people of, and some obstacles that I had to navigate.
Athletes are always looking back at their careers, and everybody wants the pinnacle of winning a championship. You were very lucky during, your time here, because you entered a period with men's basketball where there was great success, and football too. So you got to raise championship banners with both programs.
Yeah, man, very lucky, very lucky. And I'm going to take a little bit of credit for just choosing the proper time to come to Acadia, because, yeah, man, I was just a small piece of the puzzle for both of these teams, right? Like, particularly the football team, where we have so many guys and different roles and responsibilities that are unrelated. Basketball is a little different, where, for example, like as a point guard, I have the ball in my hand for a good chunk of the game. have a lot more impact on the outcome of that game than I do of a football game, for example. But yeah, at the time when I showed up, basketball had already been to nationals. We had an up and coming team. Anthony Sears and Owen Clausen and some of the other guys had laid, tremendous groundwork there the last couple of years, building up their wins and just building the culture there a little bit. And Steve Bauer and Kevin Duffy were a big part of that as well, for sure. And football wise, same thing. Like we had a couple rough years leading up to the year when I got there, and some of the guys like Kyle Graves and his crew I won't say his crew, but there's too many guys to name, honestly, on the football team. But some of the 4th and 5th year guys had definitely laid the groundwork and laid the culture for that team too. And I just happened to come in at the right time and was able to contribute a little bit. And just pretty grateful for the work the guys put in before me, because they really set the stage for that.
Your rookie year, you win a football championship in 2011. We won a 2011-12 basketball championship, and you were on the all-rookie.
Yes, that's right. And I got robbed for the A West Rookie of the Year. I don't care what anybody says. Absolutely robbed. So, man. So we came in for football. We had a good year. I think we lost to SMU once that year. I dressed for most of the games. There was a couple games I didn't dress that rookie year. So again, coming in, I wasn't even sure if I was going to play or make the team. I remember having meetings with Cummins too, my first year. And he's like, what did you expect to happen this year? He's like, did you expect to make the team? Did you expect to dress? Like, did you expect to play? So I told him, I definitely expected to make the team. I didn't expect to start by any means. I know I had such a learning curve. So for example, my football IQ when I got to Acadia was probably like a 1 out of 10. And I was playing defensive back, and I had some skills from the basketball court that transferred over. So just being able to watch the QB's eyes and have a quick step on some of the breaks for throws was something that kind of came naturally to me. But when it came to reading offensive formations and things like that, it was just way over my head at the time. So there was one game against SMU where I was Brett Backman's backup my first year, and he got hurt. So I had to go in the game for him and play cornerback. And I just remember seeing Luke Falwell hit the first time I was on the field for a tackle. I remember, so Luke Falwell was 5th year at the time, and he hammered somebody. And I just remember being like, holy shit, sorry for cursing. But how big the collision was, it was something different than practice. And I still remember that very vividly in my head, just that first collision being on Raymond Field. And I remember the only thing I was thinking in my head was just don't get beat deep, because that's just 6 easy points, right, for the offense. And as a cornerback, that was kind of my thought process, especially as a rookie. It's you get beat deep, that's easy points for the other team. And that can be game changing right away. And that's a big difference between football and basketball too. It's as a defensive back, one mistake, and that could be game. That could be it. Basketball court, one mistake, maybe it's 2 points. It's no big deal. So really interesting difference in that perspective. But anyways, with the SMU game, go in the game, every play, I'm just protecting deep third when half of the play calls, I'm supposed to be playing in the flats maybe. I'm just messing up. So the next day, it goes well. I get an interception in that game and don't get beat deep, and we win the game, so everyone's happy. But then the next day we watch the film, right? And Coach Sean Hall and Elliot Richardson are our defensive back coaches at the time, and they're pausing the film, asking me, what I'm supposed to be doing, what I'm thinking on this play. And it's just very clear I don't have any idea what I'm doing. So normally in a situation like that, right, you step in for someone who's hurt, you play well, maybe you take their starting spot and you retain it and you keep it for the rest of the season. But I just went straight back to the bench because it was clear I had no idea what I was doing, and just played on the bench for the rest of that year. And then right for basketball, I was a little more developed at that point. So again, that was a sport I played a little more growing up, and I was a little more prepared for the U Sports level or the CIS level at the time. And I came off the bench for the rest of the first semester. And then second semester, I stepped into the starting lineup and was able to start for the remainder of that year. And we gelled pretty quick. So we had a lot of new guys that year. So Anthony Ashe had transferred from Carleton. It was his first year. Jonathan Tull had just come on the scene as well. He transferred from the States. And then Ty Scott was another big recruit we had. We had a great recruiting class. So Ty Scott, Reese Larry, who was my roommate every year, he came in that year as well. Brad States was a big recruit, Shaq Smith. And then Owen and Sears were in their third year at the time. And Yeah, we had a really good team. So we were able to mesh, and we gelled really well personality wise and chemistry wise that year. And we were able to beat St. FX in the AUS final and go to nationals and have a little bit of success there too.
I'm always envious, Sean, of student athletes, and I underline student in this because of, you know, your class schedule, studying, practicing, working out, and then obviously playing games. But when you're a two-sport athlete, how challenging was it for you, especially coming in here as a rookie player for two programs and balancing academic life with playing two sports?
Yeah, so great question. Initially, like, just to give a background, in high school, I wasn't necessarily very academically inclined. I wasn't bad, but I did what it took to get, you know, the athletic and academic scholarship. So I think I had like just an 80% average in high school, but I didn't enjoy it by any means. I wasn't engaged in what I was learning until I took exercise science. Then that was a course where I was like, okay, so we can actually learn about, you know, what contributes to athleticism, how to get more athletic, how the body works in an athletic context. And for me, that really clicked. And that ended up being, you know, what I took at Acadia was kinesiology. So for me, that was just a huge difference, because I remember in high school, they would tell you like, oh, your average is going to drop 10% when you get to university, just because it's so much harder, right? But for me, it was almost the opposite. Like when I went to Acadia, because I was taking programs and courses that I was actually excited about and engaged in, and I felt like I could take stuff out of the classroom and apply it on the court and apply it on the field. You know, my grades were a lot better, just for that reason, I think. So part of it too was just learning how to manage your time, like in terms of, you know, actually doing the work, whether it was at night before practice. There's definitely some time management skills that you had to learn, but for me, it wasn't too bad during the year because I'd just be doing one sport at a time. So it wasn't like I had double duties throughout the school year for the most part. I was generally with football. I'd, you know, practice with the football team in the fall, play with the football team. I do some basketball stuff on my own, but there wasn't any more responsibility than, say, what a normal football player would have had in terms of time restraints. And then as soon as football was over, I would switch to basketball, and I wouldn't do a ton of stuff with the football team. There was one time in my second year where I hopped in basketball practice during football season, and Cummins happened to walk by practice, and he wasn't very happy about it. Let's just put it that way. And that was the last time that happened. And then where it got really tricky was in the off season. So both coaches and I had a bit of an agreement where, you know, I'd play and practice with whatever team was in season, but then as soon as basketball season ended, we had, you know, daily scrimmages and workouts with the basketball team. And then we also had, you know, a few times a week, we'd have runs at Kentville and then some lifts there too. So for me now, that's a lot of time commitment to do everything. And it's hard for me to like pick and tell the coaches, look, I'm just going to do basketball stuff for this, like for the couple month period from basically February or March to April. So shit was pretty hectic then for sure, where I was trying to do a bit of both and study for exams. So generally in the off season was the most hectic part, when I was just trying to balance the off season events of both teams. But during the seasons, it was a bit easier. I just do one at a time. And yeah, that's about it.
You think, well, we might as well get into it now. I mean, you in your last year here, you had some injuries, primarily an ankle problem, right? Correct? You had an ACL too? Didn't experience
later on.
Yeah. But do you think playing two sports contributed to that at all? Do you think that you just kind of wore your body out?
That's a great question, Eric. And I was actually writing about this the other day. And I think at the end of the day, yes. But I also think it's kind of not the load, but how we carry it, as they say. And I think I just didn't carry the load very well my first couple of years. So I trained a lot, like in the off season, even on top of what we were doing basketball wise. So sometimes, you know, my first year after basketball practice, I'd go back to the gym and I'd get more shots up with Kevin Duffy, or I'd scrimmage with some guys who weren't on the team, stuff like that. Like I just had endless energy, and I didn't necessarily do all the proper things away from the field and away from the court in terms of lifestyle, in terms of sleep, in terms of nutrition, in terms of breathing, in terms of just resting and taking time off. Like that was stuff that just wasn't on my radar. So I think I did it to myself a little bit. But that being said, I remember, so my first couple of years, I get banged up. I'd miss some practices here and there. I'd have to sit out. But come my fourth year, after my ankle surgeries, I didn't have to miss any time. I think I sat out one practice And then I was able to play at every single game for both teams, and I felt great. And that's kind of when I realized, but I had made a lot of changes to my lifestyle, to my daily routine, and to my habits, right? So I think I don't want to mislead people when I say by saying 2 sports was hard and like that contributed to my injury, because I think it's very doable for people to play 2 sports. Like, yeah, sure, it's a longer season. The football wear and tear is a little more than basketball in some ways. And yeah, you could probably use some time to recover from that before you step into another season. But at the end of the day, I think we have a lot more ability to heal on a daily and weekly basis from the activities we're doing than we give ourselves credit for. And I think once I made some changes, I started to learn that. And I think at the end of the day, yeah, playing 2 sports might have contributed to it, but I think it was more so just kind of like my lack of focus and my lack of discipline and my not putting in proper habits that led to my injuries. Because my ankle fracture, so my 3rd year to start my in September in football practice, I fractured and dislocated my left ankle, just trying to break up a pass in football practice. And leading up to that point, so in my 2nd year, I had 2 ankle injuries to that same ankle in my 2nd year. And I was playing through that my whole 2nd year. So my whole 2nd year, I was in pain like my whole year. And I was just pushing through it. I was like, you know what, let me just do what it takes to get through the season. Then I'll deal with it in the off season. I'll recover in the off season. I'll heal in the off season. But I think that was probably not the most productive belief at the time. And that prevented me from trying to heal my body during the season to a degree. So it was those previous injuries. And then that one collision was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. It wasn't necessarily a huge fluke accident. It was something that I had slowly arrived at over time. And yeah, taking that year off was definitely a little bit helpful to allow the rest of my body to heal. But yeah, I needed some time off to heal that ankle up. I ended up having reconstructive surgery the next day. So Dr. William Beveridge was my surgeon. Shout out to Dr. William Beveridge. So he actually had a really funny initial encounter with Dr. Beveridge. So we go to the hospital. I'm at Kentville General, I guess. And I'm just sitting there waiting. My surgery was in like a few hours. He comes, he introduces himself. He goes, "Hey, I'm Dr. Beveridge." And then he goes, "Do you know blank on the football team?" I won't say his name. And then I go like, "Yeah, he's one of my teammates." And then he goes, "He's dating my daughter." And then he just stares at me. It was just such a funny intro, but I remember it broke the tension in the room a little bit. It put me a little more at ease. And I really always appreciated the banter with Dr. Beveridge, and I appreciated, everything he did for me. So he's put a screw through the middle of my ankle to realign it because it had been dislocated. So like when I heard it at practice, I remember I felt the bone break right away. And then when I was on the ground, I looked at my ankle and it was pointing in a direction that I had never seen it being pointed before. So I was like, okay, that's not good. Rolled over to my side a little bit and it went back into alignment. So then no one could really tell. And Brett Backman came over, who was my defensive back buddy at the time. He was playing halfback and he's like, "Yeah, man, you're good. Get up. And I was like, "Nah, man, not this time." And went to the hospital that day. By the time I got to Kentville, my ankle was like this big. And they did the x-ray right then and there. They're like, "Yeah, that's broken for sure." And then based on the ligament damage as well is what dictated that I needed reconstructive surgery the next day. Because sometimes you can just get away with it if it's just a fracture of the bone. But because I had some significant ligament tears, I needed to get fixed up the next day. So Jim McLeod came to watch my surgery as well. And they put a screw right through the middle of the joint to realign it. They put a plate on the side of my leg, on my fibula bone, and it was probably about a foot long. Let me see if I can get the scar up here.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. Yeah. So I got a plate put in here and I got screws put all the way up. And then I had a screw put through the ankle on this side. And I had the ligaments on the inside of my ankle stitched up as well. And then in December, so that was in September, right before Christmas, I went back for a second surgery and Dr. Beveridge took a screwdriver and he put it into the screw in my ankle and literally just unscrewed the screw out of my ankle. So I still have that. Nice. And and then unfortunately I wasn't able to make it back in time for the end of that 3rd season. And thankfully I was able to get my year of eligibility back, but played the next year with that metal still in my leg. And that was that injury. So that was, honestly, that changed a lot of things for me, man. That was a tremendous learning experience. And I've learned so much, throughout that process.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? Oh, go ahead, Eric.
The one thing I could see as soon as you started talking about learning about your body and understanding, I could see that just through your time being here, just, as a person on the sidelines or wherever, I could see that you understood where you're going. And you know what, a lot of our athletes now I find come in here are well attuned of what they need to do, rest, nutrition, and everything that goes with it. And I think that started happening probably on the tail end of your career here, where people started to, to push our athletes into better lifestyle, better health and nutrition and that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Elliot Richardson was a big reason for that too. So Elliot came in the same year I did, or I came in the same year as Elliot did back in 2011. And he was a big mentor for me right off the get-go. He was actually a big reason why I came to Acadia too, because a gentleman named Greg Knight, who was a offensive lineman for Acadia. So he's the only guy who came to see me play football before I came to Acadia. So he came to watch one of my high school games in grade 12 and talked to me after the game. And I don't know if he spoke to Cummins and put in a good word for me, but I just remember after the football, so grade 12, after our football game, Steve Bauer is texting me with the things that Greg Knight had told him, telling me I need to be better at recognizing formations. So it's super weird. Like, I'm in grade 12 getting texts from the basketball coach about my football performance that day. So I was like, what's going on here? But yeah, Greg Knight had come out and watched me play. So I thought that was interesting. And then he talked to me about Elliot and showed me how Elliot was playing free safety for the Edmonton Eskimos at the time. And I knew Elliot was relatively my size. And that just gave me hope that, if I came out, did my thing at Acadia, I might be able to play in the CFL one day. And then just happened to be that, when I got there, Elliot retired. He came, started the strength and conditioning program and just took it to another level and was just an unbelievable mentor for me for my 5 years. And I learned a ton from Elliot. And it was just really special having him teach me how to play defensive back and teach me how to build up my body.
And you know what? I think the missing part, just to sort of put a cap on this part of the conversation, was that anybody that watched you play, Sean, and I really think when you were guard for the basketball team is where it was really pronounced. You're a guy that literally would go through a wall. Like, I mean, you're a tough basketball player and very intense. So you talk about playing two sports and saying, yeah, that had its impact, but you're also a guy that was going to go literally through the wall.
Yeah, I'd say so. I know what you mean. Like, definitely wasn't afraid to step in and take some charges there and play a little more physical brand of basketball. I don't know if the football guys would agree. I think they like to call me soft just because I play basketball, right? So you get mixed reviews depending on who you ask. But yeah, I mean, definitely the style of play is a factor, right? Like, if you're same thing as a football player, if you're a hard hitting smash mouth football player, you're going to suffer more injuries than somebody who avoids contact. And same thing basketball wise. So, I mean, it was definitely my style of play as well that contributed to the amounts of bumps and bruises that my body went through.
It hasn't been that many years since you left Acadia, graduating 2015 or 16. So yeah. Where has life taken you since Wolfville?
Yeah, so I played 4 years in Wolfville, and then for the next year, I finished up my degree, and I had that third ankle surgery. So I went back to Dr. Beveridge and had that plate taken out of my leg because I felt it was still reducing some of my range of motion at the ankle. So I took a couple months of recovery, took the rest of that year off, eventually decided to take my 2 years of eligibility to Ottawa U to do physiotherapy school at Ottawa U. So my decision at that point was honestly more based on basketball than anything, because I knew I wanted to do graduate school somewhere, and I knew that it would be helpful having those 2 years of eligibility because I could get some athletic and academic scholarships to help pay for some of my grad school. And I knew that I just needed more time for my body to recover. Like, I was still recovering. I'd seen what happened to some of my teammates. So, for example, Zach Skibbins is a guy who used to play running back for Acadia, and he suffered the same ankle injury I did a year prior. And then he came back the next season and tore his ACL in the opposite leg. So I had seen that happen to him. I'd seen similar stories to other people, similar injuries. And I just kind of realized, like, you really got to try to rebalance your body. Even if you're coming back and you're playing, if you're a good athlete, you can still compensate around some of this stuff in the short term, but eventually it might be 1 year down the road, might be 2, might be 3. For me, it ended up being 5 years. So I took that time off, tried to rebalance myself, but still 5 years down the road, I ended up tearing the ACL on my other leg when I was playing basketball for the Gee Gees. So that was part of my thought process too at the time, was just, hey, I need some time to rebalance my body so that I can avoid re-injury down the road, because I knew I wanted to play more sports, both graduate school and then professionally afterwards. So I was in it for the long haul at that point, and I knew I needed some time to kind of rebuild there. So ended up coming back to Ottawa. Didn't apply to physiotherapy school anywhere else because I was going to Ottawa U whether I got into physiotherapy school or not, because my goal was to go to Ottawa U and then play professional basketball after that. So ended up getting into physio, which was great because I really enjoy what I'm doing now as a physiotherapist. And yeah, it's been interesting.
You brought your life experiences to your job, your career, which I see every day, you know, whether it's your Instagram post or not, but just your relationship with what you've gone through and brought to other athletes, I think, from what I can see. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I'm really grateful that I did end up getting into physio for that reason, because I remember we did, so in kinesiology, our intro kinesiology class at Acadia, Ann Dodge was the professor. And I remember it's like the first week and she'll ask everyone in the class, there's probably over 100 people in the class, and she'll say, okay, who in here wants to be a physiotherapist? And probably like at least 50% of the class raises their hands. I think partially because some people don't know exactly what they want to do at that time, but a lot of people do want to go into physical therapy. And she kind of breaks the news to us that 5 to 10% of us are only going to get in just because the grade cutoffs are that high. And she's just repeating the stats from previous years and stuff like that. But she's also trying to just set the tone and let people know, hey, if you do want to do this, like here's the level you need to achieve at. But I wasn't one of the people that raised their hand and said, hey, I want to be a physiotherapist. So for me, it was just because I'd spent enough time in physiotherapy leading up to that point, just as an athlete. And I felt like there was better healthcare professions where I could actually help people heal their bodies. And as time went on, I realized it's not so much about your title, whether you're a doctor, a physio, a massage therapist, an osteopath, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. It's more about what you're actually teaching and your personal experience and what you're doing. But at the time, I didn't want to be a physiotherapist. So it just kind of happened to be the best situation for me at Ottawa U. But now I work here in Ottawa in 2 different gym settings. So rather than just being in a clinic, I work at 2 gyms, and I have, physio tables and physio equipment that I work with. But a lot of that stuff I do is kind of a mix of physiotherapy and strength and conditioning. So, and absolutely, man, part of the deal as a healthcare professional is helping the person create a vision for themselves of health and of a positive outcome. And I have a bit of a hack for that, just as the therapist, where a lot of the people I help treat have knee and ankle injuries. And right away, I'm able to try and provide them with a more positive vision or positive outcome for themselves, just by sharing my experience with my ankle and knee injuries, right? So that's something that other therapists don't necessarily get to do because they haven't experienced the same significant injuries I have. But I think that leads people to reach out to me a little bit with knee and ankle issues specifically. And I really enjoy helping people, get through those obstacles on their own.
Sean, if somebody had stood beside you in 2011 and said, you're going to enjoy personal success as an athlete for 2 university sports, you're going to enjoy some team success, but you're going to endure some major injuries, you may even have to take a year off, would you have done things differently?
I don't think so, man. I knew it was going to be tough. And that's part of the reason I did it too. So I remember reading a book by a gentleman named Jim Rohn before I came to Acadia. And one of the quotes I remember from that book was, set goals for what you'll become, not for what you'll get. So the idea that what you're going to develop in your character was more important than any of the accolades you would receive. And but in order to develop your character, in order to develop virtue, in order to develop discipline, hard work, in order to foster relationships, you got to go through difficult times. You can't just avoid them. So for me, I just viewed that as part of the process. It was almost like injury was inevitable. Not that it was on my mind, but I knew that was probably going to be part of it. I knew the backlash socially was probably going to be part of it. My dad had kind of tipped me off to that. And yeah, it was something that I was kind of seeking out. I was seeking out the discomfort and seeking out the obstacles because I knew those would help me develop my character, and then those would, help me. I could use those virtues and those different aspects of my character in real life, like I do today in the physical therapy and training setting. So I definitely wouldn't have, done it any differently, knowing that it was going to be hard, because even still at this point, I'm trying to seek out paths that I know are going to be difficult, because those are the things that are going to help me grow.
Excellent. This, you know what, we could talk for a long time, get into the weeds of things, and you do. You've got your own radio podcast now, and you get into the weeds of what you do.
Yeah, man. So right now in Ottawa, working at 2 clinics here, and one of them is called Human 2.0, where I work with an orthopedic surgeon. He's actually the guy who repaired my ACL when I tore it playing basketball at Ottawa U. And I work at his clinic, helping people who he's operated on recover from their, surgeries and injuries and things like that. And then I own my own physiotherapy business now called The Fixed Physio. So I'm the fixed physio technically, because I've had both of my legs fixed by orthopedic surgeons now. So Bill Beveridge and Chris Rayner are the 2 surgeons who fix my legs. And then I'm also a physiotherapist now, having gone through physio school and doing the 2 national exams. So that's what I named my business. And I work with people online. The pandemic kind of jump-started that for the whole physiotherapy profession, where people are doing more online rehab sessions and Zoom calls like this and that kind of stuff. So I do that with a lot of professional basketball players actually across the world, specifically in Europe. So there's a lot of guys who play, whether it's France or England or Russia or Germany or Italy, and they have a therapist who maybe isn't helping them the way that they would like, or maybe there's a language barrier or something like that, or maybe it's a guy like Olin Clausen who I'm just friends with, and we just stay in touch, and over FaceTime I help these guys rehab their injuries and work on their bodies and maintain their athleticism throughout their season overseas. And then I'll work with them here in Ottawa too if they're in the area during the summertime. And then as well, just in Ottawa in general, I work with more general population individuals as well. It's not just athletes, but definitely a lot of basketball players, a lot of football players. I work with some of the Red Blacks here in Ottawa too. And then, more recently started up a podcast called Rehab Yourself Radio, where I'm having on, so I had my first episode last week with my surgeon, Dr. Chris Rayner, and going to have healthcare professionals, so doctors, physios, strength coaches, massage therapists, that kind of thing, as well as athletes and former athletes, to talk about either injuries that they've dealt with themselves or injuries that they're an expert in. And then people who have suffered those injuries can come listen to that episode of the podcast and hopefully take away some information that they can use to improve their rehab process and their rehab outcome.
Well, it's just been great. Like I said, we could talk and get into the weeds, and it's just been really neat to sort of go back through your career. And, I think about character, and I think about perseverance when I think about you, and just a great career at Acadia, and, certainly wishing you all the best with your business and everything that you're doing.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you guys having me on. And hopefully this will be a little bit entertaining for some people to tune in, and looking forward to the next episode.